The girl was a poor student, yet she ranked first every year. With only 10 minutes left before the exam ended, she still hadn't picked up her pen. The boy in front finished checking his answer sheet and tossed his pen onto the floor. A classmate beside him instantly got the hint and immediately covered for the boy. They swiftly swapped answer sheets. The girl wrote her name on the sheet, and just like that, a perfect score was effortlessly secured. Some say the classroom is full of surveillance cameras. Aren't they afraid of getting caught? It's not that they can't see it, they choose to look the other way. Even the principal has to bow and scrape before their father. The twins grew up in Seoul's most extravagant residence, Hara Palace, where class distinctions were stark. The higher the floor, the greater the wealth and influence. Clearly, the twins' parents on the top floor fit this description. Their father, President Hu, made annual donations to the school, yet hired a poor teacher for their home lessons. On the teacher's first day, Mina immediately gave her a taste of her power. She stripped off her leather jacket to reveal a blouse identical to the teacher's. She demanded to know if the teacher's clothes were fake. The rich kids roared with laughter. The teacher's shabby appearance disgusted Mina. President Hu spotted Nayeon's worn-out shoes and immediately ordered his butler to throw them away. Seeing the poor girl enter his home only made President Hu more furious. He cursed while kicking away the shoes Nayeon had just worn. His wife Mi-jeon thought it was excessive and tried to talk to him, but he stormed off. She had no choice but to chase after Nayeon, apologizing and explaining President Hu had a cleanliness obsession. Though hurt, Nayeon resolved to endure for her dog's surgery money. In her heart, the dog was already family. The next day, she tasted delicious snacks on the table. When Taemin wasn't looking, Nayeon slipped several pieces into her bag. Unexpectedly, Mina witnessed this from outside the window. Mina took her limited edition keychain and secretly placed it in Nayeon's bag. Then Mina falsely accused Nayeon of theft. She snatched Nayeon's bag and dumped its contents onto the floor. Mina picked up the keychain with undisguised smugness. Nayeon couldn't defend herself. Mi-jeon, knowing her daughter's temperament, kept apologizing to Nayeon. But in this palace of chaebol, Nayeon was the only poor person. She was automatically treated like a thief. President Hu said nothing more in front of his wife, urging Nayeon to leave immediately. But as soon as Nayeon reached the ground floor, 2 security guards blocked her path. President Hu appeared behind them with his daughter. The pair had already called the police, threatening to have Nayeon arrested unless she apologized. Having been an orphan since childhood, Nayeon knew that once locked up, she'd never get out. So she chose to compromise. Even though she was innocent, she prepared to offer a humble apology. Mina, emboldened, summoned all the spoiled brats to witness Nayeon's humiliation. She publicly humiliated Nayeon before everyone. Mina shoved Nayeon into the water. They pelted her with toys and trampled her dignity with a few scraps of paper, as if only this could remind her she was different from them. But they didn't know that after they walked away, Nayeon's expression gradually changed. At the dinner table, a woman named Boyoung undid the buttons on her blouse, seemingly careless, yet utterly calculated. She leaned toward President Hu with an intensely seductive posture. She poured him a glass of red wine, ignoring others nearby. They exchanged suggestive glances. Boyoung deliberately spilled the wine, preparing to change her clothes. Before leaving, she didn't forget to wink at President Hu. President Hu immediately caught the hint and entered Boyoung's room. Hormonal tension thickened the air within moments. Just as they were about to proceed further, Mi-jeon arrived. Fortunately, she noticed nothing. Smiling at Boyoung, she turned and left. President Hu emerged and embraced his wife. Watching the couple support each other, Boyoung felt a pang of jealousy nearby. Yet seeing the intense heat in President Hu's eyes, she knew she had succeeded. Back home, President Hu couldn't stop replaying the scene in his mind. Unsatisfied, he quickly organized a second party. This time, Boyoung wore something even more revealing. President Hu's gaze never left her. Mi-jeon received a message. Her biological daughter's condition had worsened at the hospital. She had no choice but to leave everything to her husband and rush to the hospital herself. In truth, this entire sequence was orchestrated by President Hu. Watching the video feed sent by his assistant, President Hu smiled knowingly. With single-minded focus, he sought out Boyoung to vent the pent-up desire he'd suppressed for so long. Meanwhile, downstairs, Professor He noticed Boyoung's absence and slowly made his way upstairs. The two, lost in passion, remained oblivious. Suddenly, a scream echoed from below. Attorney Lee had fallen to the floor. Professor He hurried downstairs. President Hu found Boyoung again and asked why she refused to meet at the hotel. Boyoung explained that given their current status and positions, Being discovered at a hotel would have unimaginable consequences. Unexpectedly, President Hu had come prepared and handed Boyoung a key. He instructed her to go directly to the 35th floor garden suite that evening. After meticulously dressing up, Boyoung carefully unlocked the door with the key. The moment they met, they embraced. Unexpectedly, Naeon witnessed everything from below. Naeon quietly ascended the floor and secretly filmed their rendezvous with her phone. This girl, admired for her beautiful singing voice, became the target of jealousy from a wealthy young woman. The wealthy girl even schemed to frame her, falsely accusing the girl of causing her to lose her voice. Despite the girl's desperate explanations, the wealthy girl's mother remained relentless. The girl could only turn to her vocal coach for help, but to her shock, the teacher silently lowered her head. Mrs. Lin continued ranting, declaring that an ill-mannered child like her deserved to be locked up. Woo In-suk stepped in front of her daughter. She demanded the school produce evidence of her daughter poisoning someone. She refused to let the wealthy family's donations to the school be used to slander an innocent child. Mrs. Lin lashed out with a slap. She warned that if anything happened to her daughter, she wouldn't let Mrs. Lin's daughter, Luana, off easy. She vowed to have Luana expelled. Recalling her own past suffering, she couldn't let her daughter endure the same fate. Kneeling on the ground, she begged Mrs. Lin for forgiveness. She pleaded with the lady not to expel her daughter. Luana, furious at her mother's weakness, tried to pull her up, but her mother insisted she kneel and apologize together. Why should she apologize to a lying brat when she hadn't done anything wrong? To persuade Luana to abandon her musical dreams, her mother even threatened suicide. Luana retorted that she'd rather forego a mother who didn't understand her than give up her dreams. While this mother-daughter pair argued fiercely, the chaebol mother and daughter chatted cheerfully nearby. It turned out Mrs. Lin had known all along it was her daughter's scheme. She even remarked her daughter's acting lacked conviction, noting everyone heard her whispering earlier. The next day, Luana sought out the nation's finest vocal coach, Boyoung, hoping to become her student. But Woo In-suk burst in, demanding to take her away without explanation. Boyoung stared in astonishment at this old acquaintance. Woo In-suk, equally shocked, knew her daughter couldn't stay here any longer. It turned out Woo In-suk and Boyoung had attended the same school years ago. Woo In-suk possessed a uniquely heavenly voice, as melodious as angelic song. At an arts festival, her breathtaking performance earned thunderous applause from the entire audience. She was certain first place was hers, yet the trophy was awarded to Boyoung, who had made multiple mistakes, simply because her father was the school's chairman. Furious, Woo In-suk dragged Boyoung into the dressing room. When she confronted Boyoung, the latter slashed her neck with the trophy. Worse still, Boyoung showed no intention of helping her. Hearing knocks from behind, she smeared Woo In-suk's blood across her own face before feigning unconsciousness. Everyone rushed in and immediately surrounded Boyoung. They frantically carried Boyoung out, yet no one attended to the injured Woo In-suk. Woo In-suk was ultimately expelled. Her current miserable state was all Boyoung's doing, but Boyoung didn't see it that way. She believed Woo In-suk deserved every bit of it. Soon, the school held a violent condemnation meeting. Luana, deemed the aggressor, sat at the center. Mrs. Lin recounted her crimes over and over. Everyone pointed fingers at Luana. Woo In-suk, unable to bear it any longer, rushed toward the principal. A flying kick sent the principal's two front teeth flying through the air. Finally, she pulled her daughter away with authority. She would no longer stand in her daughter's way of pursuing her dreams. She even hired a vocal coach for her daughter. Having witnessed Luana's true talent, Boyoung refused to let her daughter lose to her. She intensified her daughter's training. The night after the exam, everyone received their results, though the rich kids got the placements they wanted. The top spot went to a girl named Naeon. Mina instantly recalled the girl she'd bumped into at the exam hall. Her expression was identical to the tutor's. She turned and ran toward the teacher, yanking off the wig on her head. The tutor who had always called herself Anna was indeed Naeon. Mijeong remained unaware that Naeon was her biological daughter. Seeing the name President Hu on the ID, he flew into a rage. Everyone had been completely outmaneuvered by this 16-year-old girl. He stomped on Naeon, demanding she reveal her parents' phone number. Learning Naeon was an orphan only emboldened President Hu. Mijeong pleaded with him to stop, reminding him Naeon was just a child. Mijeong rushed out after Naeon, calling her back to say she had something to give her. She instructed Naeon to wait there before turning back into the room. But when she emerged, Naeon had vanished without a trace. Naeon was dragged by the rich kids to an abandoned parking lot. They took turns humiliating her. Photos were snapped of Naeon. She limped home, her body battered. Mijeon's concern brought a sliver of warmth to her wounded heart. The next day, news of the incident flooded the media. Everyone pointed fingers at Naeon. The rich kids schemed relentlessly to drive her away. Naeon shoved Mina into a corner, her first act of defiance. The consequence? Boyoung summoned her to the principal's office. Boyoung presented a withdrawal form, demanding her signature in exchange for a large sum of money. Naeon knelt on the floor, begging Boyoung for fairness, but Boyoung sneered that having her daughter attend the same school would only corrupt her. She even said sharing the same space with Naeon made her feel filthy and unclean. Boyoung declared Naeon was a child with no manners. Naeon retorted that she was human too, no different from Boyoung's daughter Youngsun. Hearing the poor girl compared to her own daughter, Boyoung immediately gave Naeon a scalding hot bath. Naeon dropped all pretense and revealed what she had witnessed that day. Boyoung turned pale with shock. Naeon declared, "As long as you don't stop me from attending school, I'll never tell anyone." Boyoung insisted Naeon had misunderstood, but Naeon pulled out her phone from her bag. Panicked, Boyoung rushed to inform President Hu. The two conspired to kidnap Naeon during the big gathering. That evening, as Naeon walked home, a woman followed her. Woo In-suk reached out to push Naeon. Pushing her off would secure her daughter a spot at the prestigious school, but in the end, she couldn't bring herself to do it. The day of the gathering arrived. Naeon received a text message. President Hu invited her to meet at Hera Palace. Naeon was abducted by Boyoung and President Hu to the electrical room. They demanded she hand over her phone. How could Naeon be foolish enough to carry evidence on her? So they gagged her, starving and dehydrating her to torment her. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Mijeon was caring for her daughter with her ex-husband. Suddenly, a letter was slipped under the door. Opening it revealed shocking contents. The letter claimed President Hu had deceived her. The child in the hospital bed wasn't her daughter at all. Mijeon rushed to get a DNA test done herself. The report confirmed Hyerin wasn't her biological daughter. All the way home, Mijeon couldn't shake the memory of President Hu's usual gentle demeanor. Determined to uncover the truth, Mijeon quietly entered President Hu's study. Inside an architectural model, she discovered a severed finger. The ring on it was all too familiar. It turned out Mijeon had once built a small family. Her husband, worried she'd feel bored during pregnancy, played the piano for her every day. But one day, an uninvited guest arrived at their home. Her husband was shot in the head. Before Mijeon could see who the intruder was, she fainted from the shock. That person was none other than President Hu. While Mijeon lay unconscious, President Hu bribed a nurse to swap her baby with a sick infant. Then, preying on her loneliness and helplessness, he promised to care for mother and child for generations. Thus, President Hu deceived Mijeon into his grasp. Mijeon was utterly shocked, never imagining President Hu could hide so deeply. Just as she was at a loss, the mysterious note sender called. He told her to find her biological daughter by obtaining records from Hope Welfare Center. Look for a child wearing a blue jacket. But the director refused to help. Through threats using her chaebol status, Mijeon finally got the records. She opened them impatiently. The little girl in the blue jacket stared back at her. Mijeon could never have imagined Naeon was her own daughter. The records revealed Naeon had been adopted to the United States years ago, only to be abandoned later for unknown reasons. When she asked the director why Naeon was abandoned, the director impatiently snatched back the file, refusing to tell her. Mijeon hated herself for not recognizing her daughter sooner. Her own daughter had been right before her eyes all along, and her family had been bullying her all this time. Fortunately, it wasn't too late yet. From now on, she would make sure her daughter was happy. She pulled out her phone to call Naeon, but the line remained unanswered. She had no choice but to go home, change her clothes, and prepare to find her in person. But in the elevator, she witnessed her daughter falling to her death. Mijeon screamed in horror and ultimately collapsed, powerless, onto the floor. The chaebol who first discovered Naeon's body had no intention of calling the police. They secretly wrapped the body and moved it to the ground floor of Naeon's building. Then they set the house on fire to fabricate the illusion of Naeon's suicidal act. When Mijeon awoke and arrived at the fountain, everything had returned to normal. She asked Boyoung about what had just happened. Boyoung insisted everything was fine. Even President Hu said she was too weak and needed proper rest. At that moment, She noticed bloodstains on President Hu's body. Boyoung explained she'd accidentally spilled red wine. Everyone seemed eerily off. Almost every one of them had bloodstains on some part of their bodies, and Naeon hadn't responded to her phone calls. Mi-jeong grew increasingly certain that what she'd witnessed wasn't a dream. Soon, news of the female corpse found in Naeon's residence hit the television. Mi-jeong rushed to the scene. That child was her own precious daughter. She had clearly seen the hand that pushed Naeon. Mi-jeong instantly realized everything she'd witnessed wasn't a dream. They were all in cahoots to kill her child. She had to go back and avenge her child. President Hu brought Boyoung home. As they planned their future, Mi-jeong stumbled upon them. Mi-jeong collapsed onto the floor, heartbroken. The sound startled the two. Hu froze. President Hu immediately grew alert and cautiously approached to check, but there was no one there. Mi-jeong had already slipped into the elevator. Just as President Hu turned to see her, the elevator doors closed. Mi-jeong believed the two had killed her daughter to hide this secret. She drove home but was involved in a car accident. When she awoke, she found herself bound to a hospital bed. A man in a sharp suit stood by the window. This man was Director Een, President Hu's subordinate. Mi-jeong couldn't understand why he was here. Director Een warned that any rash action would lead to their mutual destruction. The same words had been spoken by the mysterious figure long ago. Mi-jeong finally realized Director Een was that enigmatic person. She demanded angrily why he was doing this. Director Een replied that if the chairman discovered the truth, she too would be in danger. He promised to protect her. He then revealed the truth. 17 years ago, President Hu had swapped her daughter. Meanwhile, unaware of the danger, President Hu found Boyoung and intended to continue. Boyoung had lost all interest by then. The next day, the rich kids all received news of Naeon's suicide. While everyone chatted idly, only Youngsun clutched her head and screamed in terror. Her strange behavior made everyone exchange bewildered glances. Youngsun hurriedly changed the subject, but Mina saw through it. She stood up, approached Youngsun, and demanded, "Did you kill Naeon?" Youngsun's guilt surfaced. Upstairs, the adults erupted into chaos. Suspicion began to spread among them. President Hu instantly flew into a rage. Following their prior arrangement, they completed the police questioning. That night, Boyoung sat on the sofa unwrapping the bandage covering her bite wound. The events of that night flooded back. That night, she had entered the electrical room alone to interrogate the dying Naeon. Naeon refused to say anything, only revealing she knew about the school's admission corruption. Boyoung, enraged, struck her across the face. Then she grabbed Naeon by the collar. Naeon bit down hard on her wrist. Boyoung lost all control. The police reported to the chief that Naeon's death wasn't straightforward, but the chief berated him, asking if he wanted to die. Meanwhile, the coroner handed Mi-jeong a USB drive, found inside Naeon's body during the autopsy, to avoid giving herself away. Mi-jeong refrained from rash actions. She continued tending to President Hu's daily needs as usual. But when President Hu mentioned Naeon's death, Mi-jeong couldn't help but tremble with rage. She vowed to send this bastard to hell. She returned to the house where Naeon had lived, hoping to find clues, but footsteps approached outside the door. Mi-jeong hurriedly hid inside a wardrobe, watching Professor He and Attorney Lee enter with a flashlight. From their conversation, she learned Attorney Lee was searching for his one-of-a-kind pocket watch. Mi-jeong accidentally stepped on a wooden stick, the sound instantly freezing both men in terror. The flashlight revealed the eyes in the closet, sending shivers down their spines. Only after they had retreated did Mi-jeong slowly emerge from the closet. Downstairs, she placed a small white flower to mourn her deceased daughter. Suddenly, a dog's barking nearby caught Mi-jeong's attention. The dog seemed to be holding something in its mouth. Picking it up, she recognized it as the very pocket watch. Meanwhile, the dazed Woo-in-suk struggled to piece together last night's events. Fragmented memories reminded her she'd been to Hera Palace. She couldn't help but wonder if Naeon's death was connected to her. Rushing to Hera Palace, she happened upon the wealthy heiress leaving. Lucy, who always looked down on the poor, sneered at Woo-in-suk for resorting to desperate measures for her daughter. How did a perfectly fine student just happen to die? She was convinced Woo-in-suk had killed Naeon, or else it was Luana. Hearing her daughter's name implicated, Woo-in-suk grabbed Lucy. Lucy struggled free, only to find bloodstains on her chest. Upon closer inspection, she realized it came from Woo-in-suk's hands. Youngsun pulled Lucy away swiftly. Woo-in-suk stared in horror at her blood-soaked hands. Could she truly have killed Naeon? Her restless mind haunted her even in sleep. In her nightmare, she pushed Naeon down the stairs, ending her life. Woo-in-suk jolted awake, frantically reassuring herself she could never be a murderer. Meanwhile, Professor He was also found to be suspicious. Mrs. Lin claimed she had witnessed everything in the bathroom that night. The bloodstains on his hands were so conspicuous. Professor He dismissed it as spilled red wine. Only after he turned and walked away did she see his once blood-soaked hands trembling violently. That day, the school held a parent-teacher meeting. The wives vied to outshine each other. Boyoung gloated upon seeing the shabbily dressed Woo In-suk, but when she saw the dignified and composed Mi-jeon, jealousy instantly consumed her. At the meeting, everyone slandered the deceased Na-eon. Only Woo In-suk stood up to speak for Na-eon. Seeing their ugly faces, Mi-jeon's hatred for them grew even more intense. Boyoung prepared to direct the public's anger toward Woo In-suk. Just as she gloated inwardly, an incident erupted at Hera Palace. A sinister note hung on an angel statue. President Who rushed to the fountain upon receiving an early morning call. After everyone had departed, Mi-jeon slowly emerged from the second floor. Her revenge commenced in that very moment. Downstairs, a crowd instantly gathered. The words Na-eon murdered at Hera Palace glared starkly. Youngsun fainted upon seeing the note. Boyoung brought her back to the room, scolding her for being so weak. Youngsun revealed she had heard everything that night. She had been hiding behind the door, listening clearly to her mother's conversation with Na-eon. After her mother left, she intended to end the life of this betrayer, but when she approached, fear overtook her. Na-eon claimed she had no choice and promised to hand over her phone if Youngsun let her go. To obtain crucial evidence, Youngsun cut the ropes binding Na-eon. Na-eon immediately sprang up and fled, realizing she'd been tricked. Youngsun raced after her in fury. In the end, she shoved Na-eon down the stairs. Youngsun claimed she killed Na-eon. Boyoung silenced her daughter, insisting Na-eon had jumped to her death from their rooftop. Back in her room, she immediately reviewed surveillance footage. Na-eon had indeed visited her study and copied all the data from her computer. This enraged Boyoung so much she smashed the computer to pieces. Meanwhile, a message rapidly went viral on the school network. Everyone pulled out their phones. Someone had exposed a video on social media showing the rich kids bullying Na-eon. The account was deactivated immediately after the exposure. Everyone exchanged bewildered glances. Youngsun growing increasingly agitated. The succession of bizarre incidents left this group of villains restless. Even the usually unflappable president who was now panicking. Mi-jeon calmly observed this troop of clowns. Boyoung then interjected, revealing she knew Woo In-suk had previously stalked Na-eon. Everyone instantly understood the situation. Meanwhile, Mi-jeon continued executing her revenge plan. That same day, everyone received a package. Attorney Lee nearly wet his diaper upon opening it. An emergency meeting was immediately convened. President Who stormed in, grabbed Attorney Lee by the collar, and demanded why he hadn't reported the pocket watch's disappearance. If the police discovered it, Attorney Lee would be the first suspect in the murder. The two nearly came to blows, but the problem still needed solving. Their attempt to frame Woo In-suk had failed. Now they had to devise a new plan. Who was the mastermind behind it all? This question kept circling in their minds. Attorney Lee suspected President Who orchestrated Na-eon's body dumping. Suddenly, all fingers pointed at President Who. What was certain now was that someone knew about their actions. Boyoung instantly thought of one highly suspicious person. Only then did President Who recall Mi-jeon's recent odd behavior. She had claimed to feel unwell, yet showed no signs of illness upon hearing about Na-eon's incident. Call records revealed she had repeatedly called Na-eon on the day of the incident. President Who snapped to realization and rushed home. Sure enough, surveillance footage showed Mi-jeon rummaging through his safe while his assistant stood nearby. He ordered his secretary to bring Director Een in, dead or alive. Knowing escape was impossible, Director Een bid Mi-jeon a final farewell before leaving this world. President Who stormed into the detective agency with his men, threatening the detective to reveal what Mi-jeon had hired him to investigate. Mi-jeon had anticipated this and instructed the detective to fabricate a plausible excuse. Thus, they learned nothing. President Who concealed his true feelings as usual, continuing to show Mi-jeon meticulous care. He waited for an opportunity and opening for Mi-jeon to slip up. Today was the day Boyoung had arranged to meet Professor He, but as soon as she arrived at the meeting spot, she received a text from Professor He. Boyoung glanced at Professor He standing nearby and ultimately decided to leave. She lied that her father was ill and she couldn't keep the appointment. Professor He grew increasingly suspicious and called Boyoung's father. From her father, He learned his daughter hadn't returned home that day. Professor, he instantly realized he'd been deceived. Boyoung arrived at the villa gates in her red sports car. The moment she stepped inside, she had President who completely spellbound. Soon, the two were eagerly playing their game. Everything unfolding was already under Mi-jeon's control. Afterward, Boyoung quietly returned to her room. She stood before the mirror, admiring her own stunning beauty with the delight of a woman. Unbeknownst to her, Professor He had already opened his eyes. Boyoung's jubilant demeanor filled Professor He with resentment. The next day, he began secretly monitoring Boyoung. He happened to see her talking to someone else and demanded to know who it was. Boyoung blurted out it was her father discussing matters related to the conglomerate. She also asked Professor He why he suddenly cared about this. After Boyoung left, Professor He picked up the phone she had forgotten. It displayed a food delivery order. Following the address, he found Boyoung there. Her hand was being held by another. Just as Professor He pushed open the door to see who it was, a waiter interrupted him. Fearing he'd disturb them, he reluctantly left. The next day, Boyoung went to school as usual. Seeing Mina and the other girl exchanging answer sheets in the classroom, she instantly hatched a plan. If she could make her daughter shine at the entrance ceremony, her father would surely be pleased. He would surely entrust the entire conglomerate to her then. So she approached President Hu and revealed the twins' cheating. Using this as leverage, she threatened President Hu into forcing Mina to give up her solo performance at the ceremony. Though deeply displeased, President Hu had no choice but to agree. On the day of the selection test, Mina came down with a severe cold. Boyoung thought Youngsun would have no competition, but unexpectedly, the tactless Luana also raised her hand. With so many students watching, Boyoung had no choice but to let them compete fairly. Luana clearly had the upper hand. The solo opportunity naturally went to Luana. Yet, as she dressed meticulously to perform, she was involved in a car accident on the way. By the time she barely made it to school, the ceremony had already begun. Youngsun stood dazzlingly on stage. Luana collapsed weakly onto the ground. It turned out that a week earlier, Mi-jeon had gone to fetch Mina's dress, and saw the dress Boyoung had prepared for Youngsun, the very one she was now wearing. It was clear Boyoung had planned this all along. This stage was destined for Youngsun from the start. At the ceremony's end, she also reinstated the arts festival. Already heartbroken, Luana broke down further when her mother announced they'd moved to Samwa village. That was Nayeon's house. How could her mother do this? Ignoring her mother's explanations, she turned and left. When she returned to school, the scene before her stunned her. They said she was living in Nayeon's house and had stolen Nayeon's spot. Luana, filled with hurt, tried to leave but was stopped by a girl. Abusive language instantly filled the entire classroom. In an instant, Luana became the target of everyone's anger. They threw paper scraps at her and used trash to wash her hair. Finally pushed to her limit, Luana shoved Minyuk away. Then she grabbed a bucket of water and splashed it directly at them. She wasn't Nayeon, she wouldn't be weak like that. But her classmates still wouldn't let up. Luana frantically swung them up. The artwork fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. She accidentally toppled over the railing, but someone pulled her back just in time. That person was the new PE teacher. After pulling Luana back, he instructed the students to take her to the infirmary. Everyone pretended not to hear. The tactful Luana had no choice but to go herself. But their torment of Luana didn't end there. Everyone was filled with hostility toward her. Only the twin siblings didn't discriminate against her. Taemin asked Luana to sit next to him from now on. Mina also invited Luana to her house to play in front of the whole class. The three rich kids looked utterly bewildered. Had these two betrayed them? Youngsun resented Taemin's kindness toward Luana. She grabbed Luana by the hair and started attacking her. Their commotion drew a crowd of onlookers, and this scene was precisely what Mina wanted to see. She had encouraged her brother to befriend Luana in the first place to crush Youngsun's arrogance. She remained bitter about the solo performance incident. After school, Mina brought Luana home. Mi-jeon then invited Woo and Suk to visit as well. This marked their first proper meeting. During conversation, they inevitably discussed children. Mi-jeon told Woo and Suk that to protect her child, a mother must stop at nothing. Leaving Mi-jeon's house, they happened to see Boyoung in the lobby. Boyoung, seeing the shabbily dressed mother and daughter, immediately summoned security to have them dragged out. Suspicious, President Hu began tailing Mi-jeon. Learning Mi-jeon had shown no unusual activity at the factory recently, he discovered numerous photos of Nayeon in Director Yin's computer files. Memories of that night flooded back instantly. He threatened Naeon to hand over her phone or he'd kill her right there. Naeon declared her brother would avenge her. Then she kicked President Hu in the leg. Enraged and humiliated, President Hu raised his hand and slapped her twice. It seemed highly likely Naeon's brother was behind everything, but business must go on. President Hu discovered a prime piece of land set to increase in value by 150 billion won in 6 months. A massive shopping mall would be built here. He demanded they raise the funds immediately. Unexpectedly, Mi-jeong overheard everything. She vowed they would never succeed. Mi-jeong tried to win Woo In-suk over, but Woo In-suk politely declined. She had to think of another way and invited Woo In-suk to a movie that night. President Hu brought Boyoung to the cinema. Their intimate gestures were seen by Woo In-suk behind them. Just as Woo In-suk marveled at the magic of fate, her phone rang. She slipped away from the cinema unnoticed while they weren't looking. Outside, she bumped into Mi-jeong heading in. Woo In-suk urgently grabbed Mi-jeong, claiming she'd seen President Hu with another woman inside. Mi-jeong, incredulous, pushed past the crowd into the theater. Then, channeling her inner drama queen, she put on an act of utter devastation. Having experienced similar heartbreak, Woo In-suk understood Mi-jeong's anguish. In truth, this entire scene was orchestrated by Mi-jeong. The night before, she had secretly checked President Hu's phone and learned they were going to Turtle Cinema. She deliberately lured Woo In-suk there to witness the couple's compromising scene, while she herself quietly observed everything from upstairs. Woo In-suk agreed to help with her auction business. Much to Mi-jeong's delight, she instructed Woo In-suk to participate in the Myeongdong land bidding as she had planned. In the final 2 minutes of the bidding, Woo In-suk discreetly slipped in her bid. President Hu and his 2 associates erupted in a heated argument after losing the bid. All their invested assets would be lost due to Woo In-suk's winning bid. President Hu promised to find a solution, and only then did they calm down. The trio couldn't fathom how Woo In-suk knew about the investment when they hadn't told anyone. President Hu suddenly thought of something and hurriedly pulled out his phone. Sure enough, he discovered the eavesdropping software on it. He immediately ordered the tech department to delete the software. Mi-jeong, who was about to eavesdrop, plugged in her earphones only to find the software had no signal. Realizing something was wrong, Mi-jeong rushed straight to President Hu's study. When President Hu pushed open the door, she had already dismantled the device and held it in her hand. President Hu struck out again. He inquired with the butler and learned Mi-jeong had been spending a lot of time with Luana's mother lately. The two were even frequently gathering together, causing him to suspect Mi-jeong once more. Sneaking to the room's door, he saw Mi-jeong answering a call. Her anxious expression seemed as if she were under some kind of threat. The next day, Boyoung received a message. "I know about you and President Hu." Boyoung was horrified and rushed to tell President Hu. She was certain it was Mi-jeong, but President Hu insisted it was someone else. Boyoung couldn't believe a stranger would go this far. Seeing Mi-jeong enter the detention center alone, she had her driver investigate. She heard it was to see the welfare center director. Boyoung began to understand the connection between Mi-jeong and Naeon. Back then, Naeon wore an apple necklace around her neck, and the painting seen in Mi-jeong's studio that day also featured a red apple necklace. Boyoung sought out President Hu again and relayed this information to him. She said Mi-jeong's investigation into Naeon must mean she intends to do something. There's only one reason that would drive her to act this way. That is, Mi-jeong must have known Naeon's parents. Mi-jeong is now 100% a suspect. When President Hu returned home and saw Mi-jeong on the phone again, Mi-jeong hurriedly turned away. President Hu snatched the phone, but the other end went dead. He grabbed Mi-jeong and demanded why she was being threatened. Mi-jeong replied, "Not me, you." She then produced the notes. They read, "Your husband killed Naeon." Mi-jeong suddenly threw herself into President Hu's arms, claiming she was terrified. President Hu always succumbed to tenderness. Mi-jeong evaded suspicion once more. She also succeeded in using President Hu's hands to kill the person who had been threatening her. It turned out everyone had already fallen into the trap Mi-jeong had set. She first sent a message to Boyoung. Then she placed the threatening materials and the pocket watch at the location where the dean had previously lived. She deliberately answered the phone in front of President Hu when he returned. In the end, she had outmaneuvered him. That day, Professor He received a mysterious text message. He instantly recalled Boyoung's stealthy entrance into the room. He quietly followed Boyoung but, by some twist of fate, failed to see the man's face. That night, Woo In-suk invited Professor He out for a late-night snack. With a touch of alcohol in her system, she deliberately threw herself into Professor He's arms. Seeing Boyoung's shocked face by the window, Woo In-suk felt a surge of satisfaction. Boyoung had stolen Professor He away using the same tactic. Now she would make her taste the same pain. Boyoung turned and stormed off in anger. Woo In-suk told Professor He about seeing Boyoung earlier. Professor He rushed out after her. It turned out she knew Boyoung would be at the villa tonight and had deliberately orchestrated this scene. Sure enough, Professor He followed Boyoung all the way to the suburban villa. The moment Boyoung entered, President Who embraced her. Though Professor He had imagined this scene countless times in her mind, seeing it unfold before her eyes was still unbearable. Filled with rage, Professor He recognized the man as her own friend, President Who. She never imagined the well-dressed chairman would engage in such deeds behind closed doors. How had he managed to appear so calm and composed around her in everyday life? As the two entered the room, Professor He quietly slipped inside. The hunting rifle on the wall instantly ignited her murderous intent. Inside, the two were laughing and playfully wrestling, utterly unaware of the impending danger. Just as they prepared to take things further, Professor He pressed the gun barrel against Boyoung's head. 2 sharp cracks later, both bodies slumped in a pool of blood. Yet this scene existed only in Professor He's imagination. The cheerful laughter echoing through the room remained unbearably jarring. Then his daughter texted, saying she was home alone and scared. For his daughter's sake, Professor He could only vent his fury by punching a tree trunk. Woo In-suk had tidied herself up and waited at home. She knew her chance for revenge against Boyoung had arrived. Sure enough, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, Professor He appeared before her. The moment he entered, he pulled Woo In-suk into his arms. Then, unable to resist, he began undressing her. The familiar scent washed over him. They spent the night together. All plans were proceeding smoothly. Afterward, Boyoung noticed muddy footprints in the hallway and felt puzzled. Returning to the garage at Hera Palace, she saw Professor He's car covered in rain and mud. A bad feeling crept over her. When she got home, Professor He hadn't returned. The next morning, when he pushed open the door, Boyoung had been sitting there waiting all night. She asked Professor He where he had gone the previous night. Without a word, Professor He dragged a suitcase from the corner, packed his clothes, and prepared to leave. Boyoung, unable to comprehend his decision, tried to stop him. Professor He proposed they go their separate ways. Boyoung couldn't believe this spineless man dared to abandon her. Only upon seeing the message from Woo In-suk did she learn why Professor He hadn't come home the night before. Boyoung threatened to cut off all financial support to her in-laws. After a fierce argument, Professor He pushed Boyoung away and turned to leave. Furious, Boyoung stormed to Woo In-suk's house and slapped her across the face. Woo In-suk didn't get angry. Instead, she grinned. This was exactly the scene she wanted to see Boyoung losing her mind. Boyoung declared she'd drive Woo In-suk out of Hera Palace sooner or later, but Woo In-suk dismissed her, insisting it remained to be seen who would leave and who would stay. Boyoung's face turned green with rage. Not only had she failed to reclaim her dignity, but Woo In-suk continued to taunt her relentlessly. Learning Professor He had arranged a dinner with her father, Boyoung followed them. Just as Professor He was about to reveal their discord, Boyoung interrupted him. He pulled Boyoung outside and warned her to stop playing games this time. He wouldn't compromise. Boyoung couldn't understand what had gotten into Professor He, at least until her father handed over the conglomerate. She needed to keep him by her side. Her father, learning of their conflict, flew into a rage. He reminded her that the family could never tolerate bad rumors. If Boyoung regained her freedom, he would reconsider the succession of the conglomerate. Recalling the muddy footprints and the mud-splattered pants from the car she had seen earlier, Boyoung decided to investigate. She pulled the memory card from the recorder and connected it to her phone. Sure enough, she saw the video from that day. Playing it, she saw Professor He standing outside the villa gate. Only then did Boyoung realize Professor He knew everything. Acting nonchalant, Boyoung sought out Professor He and even mentioned President Who in front of him. Seeing Professor He seething with anger, she dismissed it as no big deal. She ordered Professor He to stay by her side. Otherwise, she would use every connection to make his life unbearable in their circles. When she no longer needed him, she would let him go. Watching Boyoung walk away, Professor He could only endure silently. Attorney Lee, who had watched the entire spectacle unfold, couldn't help but admire Boyoung. She truly was a ruthless woman. His thoughts drifted back to the phone the nanny had found days earlier. He schemed relentlessly to get his hands on it. After decrypting it, he unlocked Nayeon's phone. Inside, he discovered the video of Nayeon blackmailing President Who. It seemed the two had planned to silence Nayeon by murdering her and then dragging them into the mess. He vowed to use this trump card wisely in the future. to expel Woo In-suk from Hera Palace. Boyoung organized a club vote, but the outcome was unexpected. Woo In-suk was unexpectedly retained. Boyoung, furious and unable to fathom who betrayed her, stormed off. It turned out to be this young couple. Seeing Woo In-suk's plight, the woman thought of herself, empathizing deeply. She secretly cast a vote for Woo In-suk. Meanwhile, Attorney Lee was moved by Woo In-suk's innocent smile. He too quietly cast a vote for her. Both understood the gesture but refused to admit it. In the pitch-black office that night, someone repeatedly played Nayeon's call recording. That person was none other than the new PE teacher, Ken. No one could have guessed he was Logan Lee, the Korean-American expat president who had repeatedly tried to meet. Logan Lee had returned to Korea primarily to avenge his sister. Looking at old photos with her, memories flooded back. That year, shortly after Nayeon arrived, to treat his illness, his father arranged for doctors to perform surgery on Nayeon. They extracted Nayeon's bone marrow. After the successful transplant, they casually pinned a false charge on Nayeon and deported her. Back then, he could only watch helplessly. He asked his parents why they did this. His father told him that keeping Nayeon alive would only become an obstacle to his inheritance. Logan Lee raged at his parents, calling them heartless. When he grew up and tried to find Nayeon, he heard strange sounds on the other end of the line. Because the call stayed connected, Logan Lee overheard the entire incident unfold. He frantically played the recording and shouted Nayeon's name. When the voice finally answered, Nayeon was a mess. Logan Lee told her to wait, promising he'd fly back immediately. Little did he know this would be their final conversation. Upon hearing Taemin was being targeted by his PE teacher, president, who immediately called him, they lured teacher Ju to the court under the pretense of playing basketball, intending to teach him a lesson. Instead, teacher Ju caught them off guard. Per their prior agreement, the winner could make a wish. President Hu, visibly displeased, demanded what he wanted. Teacher Ju pulled out his phone and sent it to the recipient. Both opened it to find a video of their children being outnumbered 5-1. President Hu's rage boiled over. Convinced teacher Ju had broken his word, he had taken the money, yet dared to keep the video. Teacher Ju claimed he hadn't taken the golden turtles in the first place, having returned them to the sofa long ago. President Hu flew into a rage and punched him to the ground. Teacher Ju then confronted Mi-jeong, revealing he knew her true identity. Mi-jeong demanded to know who he was. Their exchange was witnessed by Boyoung nearby. Just as she moved to investigate, a colleague called out to her. Boyoung had no choice but to slip away quietly. Mi-jeong rushed out from the restroom and grabbed teacher Ju, pleading for him not to interfere. She insisted she would handle matters concerning her daughter herself. Teacher Ju couldn't help but sneer coldly. He produced Nayeon's recording. Hearing her daughter's voice on the tape, Mi-jeong could no longer hold back and burst into tears. In the recording, Nayeon begged her brother to help find their mother. Only then did Mi-jeong realize her daughter had been searching for her all along. Teacher Ju declared he would fulfill Nayeon's final wish, to bring misfortune upon Mi-jeong. He gave Mi-jeong 10 days to reveal her true identity to everyone. Otherwise, he would expose it himself. After issuing this warning, teacher Ju turned and walked out. Mi-jeong had no choice but to call the detective agency for help, urging them to act as quickly as possible. She couldn't let teacher Ju ruin her plans. Returning home, she opened the envelope to find a threatening letter staring back at her. She knew time was running out. Mi-jeong retrieved a box from the safe. Inside lay a ruby ring. She resolved to accelerate her revenge. 4 months prior, she had found the ring Boyoung discarded at the dumpster. She clearly remembered Boyoung wearing this very ring at the party, and the person who pushed Nayeon in the elevator had worn a ruby ring. Boyoung and President Hu had conspired to kill her daughter. Today was the day to return this ring to its rightful owner. Hearing President Hu had sent flowers, Boyoung beamed like a woman. Every subtle expression was caught by Mi-jeong as she entered. Boyoung pulled out the jewelry box from the bouquet, about to flaunt it, but screamed in terror upon seeing the ring inside. She had thrown it in the trash. Why was it here now? Her unhinged reaction only confirmed Mi-jeong's suspicion. She was the murderer of her own daughter. Feigning ignorance, Mi-jeong picked up the ring and asked Boyoung who had given her one just like it. Boyoung, too distraught to respond, accidentally cut her hand while snatching the ring. Mi-jeong hurriedly staunched the blood, adding pointedly, "A cut on your face would ruin your looks." Guilty as charged, Boyoung fled in panic, storming into President Hu's room and kicking the door open. She brandished the ring, demanding to know what was going on. President Hu insisted he hadn't given it to her. Unbeknownst to them, Their conversation was already being transmitted by a hidden listening device. Mi-jeong was monitoring their every move. That night, she sneaked into President Hu's study again, retrieved detailed information on Logan Lee, and reported the situation to Woo In-suk. She told Woo In-suk that if she could persuade Logan Lee to meet with President Hu, she would have a way to help her recover the money President Hu had swindled from her. It turned out that not long ago, President Hu had colluded with an investment advisor to set a trap and swindle all of Woo In-suk's money. Woo In-suk had tearfully confided in Mi-jeong about this ordeal. To reclaim her assets, Woo In-suk accepted this assignment. Arriving at the hotel, she intercepted his assistant but still couldn't meet Logan Lee. Undeterred, she resolved to return the next day. This time, she succeeded, yet upon learning she came on behalf of President Hu, he immediately ordered her to leave. Refusing to give up, Woo In-suk knelt down and pleaded. Ultimately, after her desperate pleas, Logan Lee agreed to meet President Hu. Seeing that even after exhausting all efforts, she still couldn't secure a meeting with Logan Lee, President Hu naturally refused to believe it. How could a mere woman possibly arrange a meeting with such a world-class figure? President Hu demanded Logan Lee prove his identity. Logan Lee had no choice but to take out his phone and call President Hu to verify his identity. Their conversation went smoothly. President Hu invited Logan Lee to attend a weekend party. Logan Lee said he'd contact Woo In-suk with details later. After Logan Lee left, President Hu decided to keep Woo In-suk. Back in his room, Logan Lee scrutinized the photos on the wall. His assistant's investigation revealed Woo In-suk was also at Hara Palace that day. This meant Woo In-suk was also a prime suspect in Nayeon's murder. He disguised himself as Teacher Ju again and went to the dress shop where Mi-jeong worked. He threatened Mi-jeong, demanding she reveal her true identity at Hara Palace tomorrow. President Hu heard the commotion and entered from outside. Teacher Ju quietly slipped behind the door. After dismissing President Hu, Teacher Ju emerged from the shadows. He reminded Mi-jeong that the show would begin tomorrow. After meticulously dressing, Boyoung took the scarf President Hu had given her and draped it around her neck. Just imagining chatting with President Hu made Boyoung's blood boil. She had believed tonight would be a perfect evening, but when she saw the shocked expressions on the other ladies' faces, Boyoung sensed something was terribly wrong. It turned out Mi-jeong was wearing a scarf identical to hers. Boyoung forced an awkward smile, feigning grace as she walked away. Mi-jeong, however, stared at her with a look full of meaning. Back at the dress shop, the moment she saw this scarf, she instantly recalled the gift President Hu had given Boyoung at the villa, so she had the sales assistant get one for herself too, all to humiliate Boyoung at this very moment and drive a wedge between her and President Hu. Sure enough, Boyoung was successfully provoked and flung the scarf straight into the trash can. She told herself that there was nothing Boyoung couldn't have. Even President Hu would belong entirely to her sooner or later. She would step by step move into the top floor of Hara Palace. Composing herself, she emerged to see President Hu approaching nearby. Unexpectedly, Mi-jeong blocked her path. Boyoung could only watch from afar as jealousy consumed her. After downing a glass of liquor, she confronted them once more. In full view of everyone, she blurted out the truth. Mi-jeong wasn't the twins' biological mother. The crowd's expressions instantly froze into the fourth meme. Mi-jeong sensed Boyoung's provocation. Just as a confrontation seemed imminent, Mi-jeong's phone rang. It was Teacher Ju threatening to expose her true identity. President Hu signaled Boyoung away with a glance. He rebuked her for speaking such words at the party. Boyoung flared back, accusing President Hu of buying Mi-jeong an identical scarf. She loathed seeing them together. President Hu insisted he hadn't bought Mi-jeong the scarf. His desperate explanations prompted Boyoung to throw her arms around him. Their intimate display was witnessed by Logan Lee nearby. After Boyoung left, Professor He yanked President Hu inside. He berated President Hu for having the nerve to do such things here, then landed a punch squarely on President Hu's face. President Hu wasn't one to back down and immediately retaliated. The two began fighting. Fortunately, Attorney Lee arrived just in time to pull them apart. Back at the party, Boyoung overheard the ladies gossiping about Mi-jeong and felt secretly triumphant. She had successfully isolated Mi-jeong. Seeing Mi-jeong's lonely demeanor, Logan Lee finally understood why she had claimed she was already being punished. Just then, President Hu and the others walked in. Boyoung stared in shock at the disheveled Professor He. Just as she began scolding him for not dressing properly, Professor He pulled her close to assert his claim. Then, ignoring the stares of those present, he strode off. The once perfect party descended into chaos. Despite this, The main event had to proceed. President Hu invited Logan Lee to commence the lighting ceremony. With a gentle press, lights instantly illuminated the space. Outside, fireworks blazed brilliantly, mirroring that unforgettable night. President Hu confidently informed Logan Lee he had a gift prepared. As the crowd counted down, a little angel ascended slowly, carrying a spotlight sphere. When the countdown ended, everyone was stunned speechless by the sight before them. A human-shaped doll dangled down, turning surprise into terror. President Hu looked closely and saw a banner beside the doll. It read, "The murderer of Naeon is here." Everyone nearly died of fright. Only Logan Lee seemed somewhat pleased. In truth, this was all Logan Lee's doing. He had hired someone early on to swap out the silver ball. He then installed a camera on the lift pole. Finally, he dressed the doll in Naeon's shoes. Mi-jeong was utterly confused, unsure who could have orchestrated all this. Seeing his goal achieved, Logan Lee pretended to be disappointed and left. Back in his car, he immediately activated the listening device to monitor everyone at the party, hoping to identify the real killer through their reactions. Just then, Mi-jeong received a text from Teacher Ju. He demanded she immediately reveal she was Naeon's mother. Sitting on the sofa, Mi-jeong was at a loss. This scene was witnessed by Boyoung. Teacher Ju kept sending urgent messages. With time running out, Mi-jeong reluctantly prepared to confess, but Boyoung suddenly pulled her aside. Boyoung insisted Mi-jeong had been orchestrating everything all along. To prove her point, she produced evidence, a drawing featuring Naeon's apple necklace and those distinctive eyes. Attorney Lee instantly recognized the subject as Naeon. Boyoung cut straight to the chase, declaring Naeon was Mi-jeong's biological daughter. Mi-jeong had no choice but to admit she had indeed painted it. She explained she had witnessed Naeon falling from Hera Palace that day. She even saw the hands that pushed Naeon clearly. Suspecting Boyoung and President Hu were the culprits, she revealed their special relationship. She then produced the villa surveillance footage as proof, leaving Boyoung speechless. She knew they had confined Naeon in the electrical room that day. Witnessing this, Logan Lee was utterly shocked. He resolved to keep Mi-jeong's identity private. The next day, the rich kids received a message. Opening it revealed a message from Naeon. Everyone felt a chill and rushed to the music room to discuss. Taemin played the voice message Naeon had sent, a recording of the time they had bullied her. Everyone exchanged bewildered glances. The recording had been destroyed by their parents. How could it reappear? Youngsun suspected Luana was behind it. After all, Luana was the only one connected to Naeon. Taemin insisted they couldn't make assumptions without concrete proof. Mina proposed searching for evidence together. When Luana unlocked her phone, Lucy secretly noted the password. Minhyuk deliberately picked a fight to distract Luana. Mina seized the chance to grab Luana's phone. After unlocking it, they began searching for clues. Youngsun spotted a photo of Luana holding a little white dog. She pulled out her own phone to compare. It was clearly Naeon's puppy. It seemed Luana really was behind the scheme. Back home, Mina secretly used her brother's phone to message Luana. Luana dressed up meticulously and headed to the agreed location. But when she heard a noise and turned around, it wasn't Taemin who entered, it was the other bullies from Hera Palace. Sensing trouble, Luana tried to leave immediately but was surrounded by the group. Youngsun berated Luana repeatedly, saying she shouldn't covet Taemin, only she was worthy of him, demanding Luana give up her thoughts and disappear from their sight. She even said Luana was just as hateful as her mother. Youngsun gritted her teeth, accusing Luana's mother of deliberately seducing her father, a reason her parents constantly fought. "She destroyed my family," Youngsun declared, revealing that her father had spent the night at Luana's house. Though Luana refused to believe it, the memory of that day flashed vividly in her mind. She recalled arriving home to find Professor He rushing frantically into the stairwell. The house was in disarray, littered with empty bottles. Her mother's expression had been one of panic. Luana's eyes welled with tears, yet she still refused to believe her mother capable of such a thing. Youngsun warned Luana to obey her from now on, or she would spread this story far and wide. Before leaving, she made Luana write a pledge to keep their bullying secret and to obey only her and Youngsun from now on. Returning home, Luana was heartbroken. She waited until her mother fell asleep, then quietly slipped into her room and took her phone. Sure enough, she found photos of Professor He sleeping on the device. This time, she fully believed Youngsun's words. From then on, she obeyed Youngsun's every command. The first thing she did was withdraw from school. Luana had no choice but to go to the office and find Boyoung. Handing her the withdrawal application, Boyoung stared at Luana in disbelief. though she couldn't fathom what had come over her today. A faint flutter of excitement stirred within her at Luana's voluntary withdrawal. On the way out of school, everyone threw paper scraps at Luana, only Taming chased after her. But when he reached the playground, Luana had vanished without a trace. Ever since President Hu and Boyoung's relationship was exposed at the party, President Hu began to see Mijeong in a new light. He asked Mijeong why she knew but never revealed it. Mijeong replied she'd been waiting for him to change his mind, but President Hu showed no remorse. Mijeong bluntly suggested they go their separate ways. President Hu firmly refused. He asked Mijeong to give him time, promising he'd handle things properly. Mijeong went to the detective agency to continue her investigation. She learned the real teacher Ju had been in a car accident 5 years ago and still hadn't regained consciousness. Looking at this man's fake background information, Mijeong decided to uncover his true identity. She sneaked into the hotel where teacher Ju stayed and hid in his closet while he was out. There, she found his wig and photos of him with Naeon. Recalling their first meeting, his movements, his gaze, it was identical to Logan Lee. Mijeong finally realized he was Naeon's brother. When Logan Lee returned, she ambushed him from behind. She despised the Logan Lee family for their cruelty toward Naeon. They took Naeon's bone marrow and then abandoned her. Their crimes were heinous. Mijeong plunged a knife into Logan Lee's chest. Logan Lee claimed he hadn't known about it at the time. He suggested they should first deal with President Hu to avenge Naeon. He proposed they join forces, promising to take full responsibility for his past sins after this matter was resolved. Emerging from the room, Mijeong happened upon President Hu had come looking for Logan Lee. President Hu stared at Mijeong in disbelief. Her evasive gaze seemed to hide something. He loudly demanded why she was emerging from Logan Lee's room. Just as Mijeong froze in panic, Logan Lee stepped out. "You have a good wife," Logan Lee remarked. These words echoed exactly what he'd once told Professor He. This infuriated President Hu, but the truth wasn't what he imagined. Due to the party incident, Logan Lee had initially refused to sign the contract. It was Mijeong who found him and apologized, prompting him to reconsider. The ever-suspicious President Hu didn't believe Logan Lee's explanation, but he held his tongue. Back home, he told Mijeong they had a lead on the person who set up the doll prank at the party. Mijeong felt uneasy but forced herself to stay calm as she asked President Hu who the person was. President Hu replied it wasn't confirmed yet. Back in her room, Mijeong immediately relayed the news to Logan Lee and urged him to be extra careful. That evening, President Hu set his sights on Hyerin. He had killed her in the hospital precisely to claim the land under her name today. He informed Mijeong he'd filed Hyerin's death certificate himself. Mijeong was deeply displeased. She was on the verge of directly accusing President Hu of murdering Hyerin. President Hu reminded Mijeong that the land under Hyerin's name required death registration to be transferred. Mijeong flew into a rage, declaring the land was left to Hyerin by their father. She warned President Hu not to make any decisions without her consent, then stormed out. It turned out President Hu had insisted on staying with Mijeong solely to secure that piece of land. Meanwhile, Boyoung's father decided to step down, handing the chairmanship to Boyoung. Boyoung was overwhelmed with gratitude. She had waited for this moment for so long. She promised her father she would make the school better and better. Her sister questioned her strained relationship with Professor He. Boyoung countered that they were actually on good terms. She finally regained her freedom and could be herself again. The title of chairwoman earned her respect. At that moment, her damn vanity was immensely satisfied. Boyoung rushed to find President Hu to share her triumphant joy. For the first time, she confessed her feelings to him. After a moment of shock, President Hu instantly broke into a smile. Who knew what schemes were brewing in his mind? Meanwhile, Teacher Ju rode his motorcycle back to the hotel. Attorney Lee had also followed him there. Suspecting Teacher Ju intended to meet Logan Lee and sabotage their partnership, he relayed the information to President Hu. President Hu ordered him to find a way to stop him and said he was on his way. Just as Teacher Ju was about to open the door, Attorney Lee knocked him unconscious. He then dragged him out of the hotel. When Teacher Ju opened his eyes again, President Hu was staring back at him. He pressed a gun against Teacher Ju's forehead, demanding to know who he really was. Teacher Ju snatched the gun from Attorney Lee's hand and stood face to face with President Hu. He then fired a shot at a target, remarking that President Hu's misunderstanding of him ran deep. Finally, ignoring the stunned pair, he turned and walked away. The next day, Mijeong came to cook for Luana at Woo In-suk's request. She took the opportunity to ask about Luana's reason for dropping out. After learning the reason, she comforted Luana, urging her to trust her mother. Once Woo In-suk returned home, she relayed the matter to her. Learning of her daughter's situation, Woo In-suk felt deeply guilty. She resolved to take revenge on Boyoung. She arranged a private meeting with Boyoung. After a barrage of mockery, Boyoung unexpectedly admitted many truths. She even declared that no matter how despicable she was, Woo In-suk still wasn't worthy of comparison. Unexpectedly, Woo In-suk pulled back the screen behind her, revealing a heavyweight figure standing there. Boyoung immediately groveled and rushed forward to explain to her father. Woo In-suk assumed President Kane would punish Boyoung, and revealed how Boyoung had slashed her 25 years prior. Yet she overlooked the love every parent holds for their child. President Kane sneered dismissively, mocking Woo In-suk for overestimating herself before leading Boyoung away. The same scenario repeated itself, and Woo In-suk finally broke down in tears. Boyoung thought the matter was settled after seeing her father off. That poor woman Woo In-suk could never win against her. Yet moments later, Attorney Lee called to inform her that her father had revoked her inheritance rights. The conglomerate chairmanship would now pass to her younger sister. Unwilling to accept this, Boyoung sought out her father once more. She begged for another chance, vowing she would never disappoint him again. But President Kane could not tolerate the scandal and declared his decision final. Boyoung sobbed, explaining she acted out because Professor He didn't love her. Hearing this, her father grew angrier. "You chose him yourself." Boyoung refused to give up, crying and pleading with her father while grabbing for his briefcase. In the commotion, President Kane suffered a heart attack and fell down the stairs. Boyoung rushed to check on him, reaching for his outstretched hand. But then she thought better of it. Getting the briefcase was more important, so she clutched the documents and abandoned her father. Running away, she went to the surveillance room, deleted the footage, and then burned her father's will. Suddenly, someone spoke before her. A man stood there, holding an umbrella. The man admitted he had witnessed the entire incident and intended to help Boyoung handle the aftermath. Back home, she pounded the piano keys to mask her inner fear. She believed her father had brought this upon himself. When Woo In-suk slashed her neck, her father hadn't reprimanded her. Instead, he raised his hand and slapped her. He blamed her for losing to a poor girl without a father. Upon receiving the news, Boyoung rushed to the hospital. Before even entering, she forced herself to build up her emotions. Then, crying and wailing, she fainted. Everyone assumed she couldn't bear the shock of her father's death. Only Mi-jeong noticed something was off. After President Kane's death, Boyoung became the beneficiary. This not only covered up her own scandal but also secured her position as chairwoman. Moreover, the school's surveillance system had malfunctioned just days prior. Shin Mi-jeong suspected Boyoung was behind it and sent teacher Ju to investigate the monitoring room. After the funeral, Boyoung made a cautious phone call. The bespectacled man assured her everything was handled, and she finally breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Woo In-suk, drunk, threw herself into President Woo's arms. Blood accidentally splattered onto President Woo's face. Instantly overcome with agony, childhood memories flooded back. He frantically choked Woo In-suk's neck until his secretary injected him with a sedative, forcing him to release her. The secretary then escorted them to the villa, with her clothes drenched in red wine. Woo In-suk had no choice but to change into Boyoung's clothes. Just as she prepared to leave, she spotted Boyoung sitting on the sofa. Boyoung stared in astonishment at the woman wearing her clothes. No wonder she couldn't reach President Woo. All day he'd been with this woman. Furious, Boyoung stormed into the inner room. Seeing President Woo lying half-naked on the bed, she completely lost control. Emerging from the room, she raised her hand and slapped Woo In-suk across the face. She screamed at Woo In-suk, calling her shameless for coming to her home and casually wearing her clothes. Woo In-suk, enraged by this, retorted that Boyoung had no self-respect whatsoever and that she herself wouldn't stoop to staying here. She added that Boyoung, a person who couldn't stand the light of day, had no right to act so righteous. She ordered Secretary Chow to drag this troublesome woman away. The astute Secretary Chow promptly pulled Boyoung out. After bidding farewell to the awakening President Woo, Woo In-suk left the villa with a sultry sway. Back home, she received a message from Mi-jeong. Mi-jeong invited her to meet at the 47th floor of Hera Palace. Arriving at the spot where Naeon had fallen, the familiar scene brought everything flooding back. That night at the celebration, a huge argument erupted at home because her daughter hadn't gotten into school. Woo In-suk drowned her sorrows in alcohol. After several rounds, she went to Hera Palace to confront Boyoung but was intercepted by Professor He, who escorted her away. She shoved Professor He aside and entered the elevator alone. When she emerged, She happened to see President Hu leading Naeon toward the terrace. At that moment, President Hu was choking Naeon. She accidentally smashed a nearby flower pot. The sound instantly startled President Hu, who fled in panic. Later, she was the one who pushed Naeon down. Woo-in-suk never imagined the person who killed Naeon was herself. As she frantically tried to escape, she bumped into Mi-jeong, who was coming by and recoiled in fright. Mi-jeong confessed she was Naeon's mother. Woo-in-suk was utterly shocked. Mi-jeong revealed she had been manipulating her all along, including arranging her entry into Hera Palace. Mi-jeong laid out her plan, and Woo-in-suk grew terrified. When Mi-jeong blamed Boyoung for Naeon's death, Woo-in-suk finally breathed a sigh of relief. Taking advantage of Mi-jeong's phone call, she quietly slipped away. Back home, Woo-in-suk began frantically searching through her wardrobe. Sure enough, she found the apple necklace in the pocket of one of her own dresses. 4 days afterward, she was haunted by the same recurring nightmare. In the dream, she heard piano music. Pushing open her daughter's door, she saw the dead body of Naeon. Naeon kept asking her, "Why did you kill me?" Mi-jeong then stood up, furious, demanding why Woo-in-suk had betrayed her trust and brutally murdered her daughter. She vowed to punish Woo-in-suk in the same manner. Realizing she had no way out, Woo-in-suk resolved to conceal the truth forever. She couldn't let her daughter become the child of a murderer, so she stuffed everything related to the celebration into garbage bags and burned them in the countryside. To evade Mi-jeong, she avoided answering calls and left early for work. Little did she know Mi-jeong was waiting right at her door. Mi-jeong begged Woo-in-suk to testify so the real killer could be brought to justice. Ignoring Mi-jeong's pleas, Woo-in-suk turned and walked away. Just then, Mi-jeong received a call from the caregiver. They reported that President Hu had already filed a death certificate for Hyerin. Enraged, Mi-jeong urgently called Logan Lee. She resolved to accelerate her plan and execute it sooner. Meanwhile, Luana casually slipped her arm through Taemin's. Ignoring the stunned stares of those around them, Taemin declared to everyone that he would protect Luana, warning them to watch their words and actions from now on. Mina claimed Luana deliberately approached her brother with ulterior motives, but Taemin paid no heed. After school, Youngsun was furious. Convinced Luana hadn't taken her warning seriously, she threatened Luana, declaring she'd expose her mother's scandal immediately. Luana smiled. She was no longer the puppet Youngsun once manipulated. She told Youngsun to go ahead and expose it. That way, Youngsun's father would be exposed too. Then everyone wouldn't just blame her mother alone. Youngsun, enraged, shoved Luana into a chair. Luana didn't back down either. Just then, Taemin came looking for Luana. Luana deliberately invited Taemin over for tutoring. Consumed by jealousy, Youngsun grabbed Luana's hair and started attacking her. Taemin rushed to stop her. Youngsun, refusing to accept this, angrily accused Taemin of siding with that filthy woman's child. She demanded to know what she lacked compared to Luana. Taemin leaned close to Youngsun's ear and whispered a warning, "My dad and your mom are dating." Youngsun froze in shock. Taemin warned her to behave before making a bigger fool of herself, or else the consequences would be unimaginable. With that, he pulled Luana away from the lounge. Youngsun went berserk, tearing up all her mother's posters. Her mother had always been her role model, but now she was nothing. She tossed aside their family photo and collapsed onto the floor, utterly defeated. 4 days afterward, Youngsun was completely distracted. Even glimpsing her mother passing by the window sent her into a panic. Screaming in terror, determined to uncover the truth about her mother, Youngsun secretly slipped into the office, found her mother's phone, and began flipping through it. But before she could unlock the passcode, Boyoung walked in. Youngsun panicked and tried to flee, but Boyoung grabbed her arm. Youngsun instantly exploded, warning Boyoung not to touch her with those filthy hands and declaring how deeply disappointed she was in her mother. Meanwhile, Mi-jeong accelerated her revenge plan. She deliberately led the people following her into the mall, then entered a restroom. When she emerged again, Secretary Chow and his crew immediately followed, but they didn't know that the Mi-jeong they encountered was no longer the same Mi-jeong. It must be said, Mi-jeong's diversion tactic was truly brilliant. Unaware of the switch, President Hu believed everything was in place and instructed Woo-in-suk to arrange the contract signing with Logan Lee. As a reward, he slipped a set of car keys into Woo-in-suk's hand. Before leaving, he gave Woo-in-suk a meaningful look. Clutching the keys, Woo-in-suk seemed to develop a different kind of feeling toward President Hu. Everything proceeded with meticulous precision. President Hu's negotiations with Logan Lee, using Hyerin's land as collateral, were progressing smoothly. Unexpectedly, Mi-jeong appeared, bringing with her the land's true owner, President, who looked utterly bewildered. How could Hyeren still be alive and well? Mi-jeong revealed she had rescued Hyeren long ago and kept her hidden. She then asked President Hu if he was pleasantly surprised. President Hu's expression turned uglier than eating dog shit. Hyeren vehemently refused to agree to mortgaging the land. Enraged, President Hu brutally beat the secretary responsible for monitoring Mi-jeong. He rushed home to confront Mi-jeong, only to find the stubborn Boyeon waiting in the hall. She demanded President Hu explain his relationship with Woo In-suk. President Hu ignored her and stormed straight into the house. He shouted Mi-jeong's name loudly. Spotting Mi-jeong sitting by the window, he roared, "Where did you hide Hyeren? What have you been planning all this time?" Mi-jeong replied that Hyeren was in a place he couldn't find. A safe place. Furious, President Hu violently grabbed Mi-jeong by the throat. At the critical moment, Mi-jeong grabbed a nearby ornament and hurled it at President Hu. President Hu collapsed unconscious on the floor, and Mi-jeong narrowly escaped. She hurried downstairs, where the butler urged her to leave immediately. She wanted to take the children with her, but President Hu was chasing her down the stairs. With no other choice, she temporarily entrusted the children to the butler and fled first. By the time President Hu reached the bottom of the stairs, Mi-jeong was already gone. He immediately called Secretary Chow. Woo In-suk knew President Hu's late-night summons was far from work-related. President Hu smiled knowingly, praising Woo In-suk for being both intelligent and beautiful, each harboring their own agenda. They clinked glasses. Woo In-suk set down her glass, her gaze intensely seductive. The atmosphere instantly turned eerie. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was Mi-jeong calling. In this setting, Woo In-suk didn't want Mi-jeong to know. President Hu instructed her to answer, using the call to gauge her current feelings toward him. Woo In-suk unlocked her phone and took the call. Mi-jeong pleaded again for her to testify at the police station, asking where she was. Woo In-suk glanced at President Hu, offered no reply, and hung up abruptly. President Hu proposed a partnership with Woo In-suk. Woo In-suk asked what benefit she would gain. Without hesitation, President Hu let his actions speak for him. The next morning, Woo In-suk awoke to find a note from President Hu inviting her to meet him in the downstairs restaurant. President Hu wondered why Woo In-suk had defected to his side. After all, Mi-jeong was her beloved sister, and Boyeon was the person she hated most. She had no reason to approach him. Woo In-suk explained that Mi-jeong had run away from home. She could also see that President Hu was avoiding Boyeon, so she had come herself. This conveniently aligned with President Hu's intentions. Woo In-suk told President Hu, "You can use me. I might just tell you what you want to know." President Hu stated he wanted to know Mi-jeong's whereabouts immediately and who else was helping her. He instructed Woo In-suk to go to his home and bring Mi-jeong's clothes to her. Then he pulled out a key card from his pocket, saying no one would be home at 7. Woo In-suk drew the key card for the penthouse. She was finally stepping through the gates symbolizing power and privilege. She opened the private elevator and stepped inside with confident satisfaction. Arriving at President Hu's residence, its opulence was unlike anything Woo In-suk had seen in decades. She ascended to the second floor as if she were the owner. Mi-jeong's walk-in closet dazzled her completely. She selected a red evening gown from within. Sliding it on, she stepped into the dressing room. The woman reflected in the mirror, graceful and alluring, left her utterly captivated. Just as she was lost in admiration of her own beauty, President Hu suddenly appeared behind her. Startled, Woo In-suk spun around and apologized, saying she'd take the dress off immediately. Before Woo In-suk could react, President Hu swept her into his arms. The next day, Logan Lee finally agreed to sign the contract. The two negotiated pleasantly. To celebrate their first collaboration, he invited the distinguished guests and their children from their previous meeting to a weekend party. He also extended an invitation to Ning Woo In-suk and her daughter. That evening, Boyeon received a message. Opening it revealed the video from the day her father had been involved in the incident. Boyeon felt a chill run down her spine. Who had recorded this footage? On the day of the party, everyone arrived in their finest attire. Logan Lee sent his secretary to pick them up, but after sampling the fine wine, an intense dizziness swept over them. Everyone passed out. When they awoke, they found themselves trapped inside a metal van. The suspended vehicle suddenly plummeted downward. A massive fireball erupted, sending the wealthy guests into shrieking panic. Then someone pressed a switch, and an unknown liquid gushed out. The tycoons caught a whiff and realized it was gasoline, making their already tense nerves even tighter. As they turned to flee, A timed explosive egg suddenly appeared before their eyes. Everyone felt utterly hopeless. President Hu tried to call for help, but his phone had no signal. The metal car was now engulfed in flames. The slightest misstep would mean they'd all burn to death. Boyang spotted a masked figure standing directly in front of the vehicle. Their children watched them through the screen, seeing their parents in mortal danger. The spoiled brats finally shed tears. At that moment, Teacher Ju declared from the monitoring room, "Because of what you did before, your parents will pay with their lives." The rich kids completely broke down. Knowing their parents would be burned alive, they had locked Naeon in the metal van and placed a cake inside. Panicked, Naeon accidentally knocked over the cake, instantly setting the van ablaze. Taemin saw this and tried to free Naeon, but they had accidentally damaged the door earlier, making it impossible to open. They abandoned Naeon and fled in a hurry. As the flames grew fiercer, Naeon mustered every ounce of strength to smash the window glass. Staggering, she crawled out. The moment she emerged, the metal van exploded. Naeon crouched on the ground, disheveled. Later, Naeon sent messages condemning them, but they only mocked her mercilessly. Not a single one showed a shred of remorse. Now their own parents faced the same fate. Only then did they know fear, each filled with overwhelming regret. Teacher Ju used the intercom to make them write down what they had done to Naeon. Through the masked man's accusations, the wealthy families learned their children had nearly killed Naeon, yet they still chose to cover it up, desperately explaining it was just a harmless prank among kids. President Hu even raged, demanding the masked man be torn to pieces. The masked figure remained utterly unmoved. Using the child as leverage, he demanded they confess their crimes against Naeon. President Hu urged everyone not to fall for it, claiming the masked figure was merely intimidating them. Lucy's mother, desperate to survive, immediately declared her innocence. She too had only learned later that Naeon was locked in the electrical room. That day, she had merely cleaned the bloodstains from the fountain. Attorney Lee stated President Hu was orchestrating everything. Chaos erupted in the car as everyone began blaming each other. Upon closer inspection, it was merely a mannequin. The real black-clad figure emerged from the shadows. When she turned, everyone recognized her as Mi-jeong, the woman they'd worked alongside daily. President Hu ordered her to stop immediately, but Mi-jeong had no intention of letting them off. Tears streaming down her face, Mi-jeong cried out that Naeon was the daughter President who had secretly swapped years ago. Only then did they realize Mi-jeong was serious, and they all apologized. But after planning for so long, Mi-jeong wasn't about to stop there. In an instant, she vanished, leaving only the ticking countdown of the bomb. With escape impossible, they could only wait for death. But the bomb merely sparked, and then the door opened. They ran out only to be drenched by a gushing water column. Now they cared little for anything else, driven only by the desperate urge to return home. Yet the sole escape route lay before them, a cesspool. Ignoring their disheveled state, they plunged into the filthy water and swam through it. President Hu had shed his former arrogance. Boyang no longer radiated sensual beauty. The splendor they had known that night in Hera Palace stood in stark contrast to their current wretched state. Back in the screening room, each parent eagerly embraced their child. After returning from the junkyard, Mi-jeong sought out Woo In-suk again. This time, she resolved to confess everything. While brewing coffee, Woo In-suk disclosed Mi-jeong's whereabouts to President Hu. Mi-jeong realized it was Woo In-suk who had run over her daughter. She planned to give Woo In-suk a chance to turn herself in, but Woo In-suk kept playing dumb, insisting Mi-jeong had no proof. In truth, Mi-jeong had already uncovered the entire truth. It turned out that on the day they met on the 47th floor, Woo In-suk had slipped away silently, which had struck Mi-jeong as odd. That evening, Luana called again, saying her mother hadn't answered her calls. Unsettled, she decided to check on her at home. The moment she entered, she spotted the apple necklace lying on the floor. She racked her brain, unable to understand how Woo In-suk could have Naeon's necklace, so she went to confront Woo In-suk immediately to get answers. But Woo In-suk's unusual behavior made her suspicious. She followed Woo In-suk to the outskirts and watched silently as she tossed clothes into a furnace. After Woo In-suk left, Mi-jeong immediately rummaged through the burnt clothes and found the necklace inside. Mi-jeong said she really wanted to understand her, but it was clear Woo In-suk was trying to erase her memories of that night. Woo In-suk tried to wriggle out of it, demanding Mi-jeong produce evidence and declaring they were no longer sisters. Mi-jeong revealed that after Naeon died, she had taken her for an autopsy and discovered Woo In-suk's DNA there. Woo In-suk refused to admit she killed Naeon. With no other choice, Mi-jeong threatened to use Luana to force Woo In-suk to confess. President Woo, alerted by the message, rushed over and took Mi-jeong back to the secret room. Fortunately, Logan Lee lured the tiger away from the mountain and rescued Mi-jeong. Back at the hotel, Mi-jeong revealed that Woo In-suk had strangled Nayeon to death. Hearing this, Logan Lee couldn't contain himself a moment longer. He stormed out, determined to find Woo In-suk. He vowed to eliminate every last one of these despicable murderers. Mi-jeong urged him to wait. She would make them all suffer the most agonizing punishment. Seeing the truth exposed, President Woo convened an emergency meeting with the wealthy tycoons. They discussed a unified story for the future. Mi-jeong had deliberately dragged everyone into this to seize more of his fortune. Sure enough, on the day Boyoung was inaugurated as chairwoman, the online scandal about Chongya Arts High School's admissions corruption exploded. Reporters swarmed in instantly, surrounding Boyoung. Moments later, Boyoung was taken away by the prosecution. Meanwhile, President Woo was holding an investment briefing. Attorney Lee believed they were about to make a huge profit, but the main player, Logan Lee, was nowhere to be seen. Professor he sensed something was off, though he couldn't quite pinpoint what. Meanwhile, Logan Lee had already slipped into President Woo's office and swapped out the contract. The meeting dragged on, leaving everyone impatient. President Woo had no choice but to take the stage himself. His passionate speech fired up the investors. Suddenly, a group of police stormed the venue. They arrested him for illegally raising funds under Logan Lee's name. Just as he was shouting for Logan Lee descended from the second floor. President Woo ordered Logan Lee to explain to the officers, but Logan Lee declared, "I'm the one who reported you." President Woo suppressed his rage, utterly bewildered. He demanded why Logan Lee would do this. Without a word, Logan Lee tossed a wig at him. Then, adopting Teacher Ju's distinctive tone, he addressed him. Only then did President Woo realize Logan Lee was that despicable Teacher Ju. But now he was trapped like a cornered beast, powerless to fight back. The next day, news reports flooded in. President Woo's company was under investigation, and the children of Hara Palace were shown bullying Nayeon. Soon after, the wealthy residents of Hara Palace were implicated and taken away by the police. Woo In-suk surveyed the mess and knew escape was impossible. Rushing home, she called out her daughter's name only to find Mi-jeong sitting on the sofa. Panic seized her. What if Mi-jeong had harmed her daughter? She frantically searched the house, only to find Luana gone. Crying, she begged Mi-jeong to confess to everything, pleading for her to spare Luana. Mi-jeong told her to turn herself in, but Woo In-suk refused. She didn't want Luana to grow up as the daughter of a murderer. Even if she confessed, Nayeon wouldn't come back to life. She begged Mi-jeong to let her off the hook. Mi-jeong planned to tell Luana about this. Woo In-suk immediately stopped her, claiming she would turn herself in. After bidding farewell to Luana, Mi-jeong hurriedly left. That night, Youngsun saw the internet flooded with hateful comments about her and finally lost control, exploding. Since the wealthy had already coordinated their stories, the police couldn't do anything to them. After completing their investigation, they sent them home. Boyoung arrived home to find her daughter lying on the bed. Pulling her close, she discovered her daughter was ice cold. After the doctor's all-out efforts, Youngsun's life was saved. Boyoung realized everything was Mi-jeong's means of revenge. She knelt before Mi-jeong, begging her to spare Youngsun. She said it was all her fault and she was willing to take the punishment. Mi-jeong demanded she abandon her career, but Boyoung refused. Through her tears, Boyoung suddenly laughed. She rose from the floor. Mi-jeong revealed the affair between Woo In-suk and President Woo. Enraged, Boyoung wanted to tear Woo In-suk apart. Meanwhile, Woo In-suk had found President Woo, demanding he help kill Mi-jeong. As they spoke, Boyoung stormed in, shoving Woo In-suk aside. She screamed at Woo In-suk, calling her shameless for always stealing others' things. President Woo's defense of Woo In-suk made Boyoung's already boiling anger boil over. A fierce argument erupted between them. President Woo pushed Boyoung aside, supporting Woo In-suk as they slowly walked away. With Mi-jeong's deadline fast approaching, Woo In-suk was at a loss. Just then, Mi-jeong sent a message urging her. She pulled a kitchen knife from the kitchen and slipped it into her bag. At the hotel, Logan Lee pulled out a plane ticket, urging Mi-jeong to go to the US with him. He wanted Mi-jeong to be happy. Seeing Mi-jeong take the ticket, he pulled her tightly into his arms. Little did he know that after this embrace, he would never see Mi-jeong again. Butler Yang called to inform Mi-jeong, President Woo had taken both children to the study. Mi-jeong rushed back, entering the darkened study where someone stabbed her multiple times. Woo In-suk, terrified, immediately picked up Mi-jeon's body. Soon after, the police arrested Woo In-suk. At the airport, Logan Lee waited endlessly for Mi-jeon's arrival. Secretary Hong sent him a news alert reporting Mi-jeon's death. Panicked, he rushed out of the airport. The officer questioned Woo In-suk about her motive for killing Mi-jeon. Woo In-suk confessed to murdering Mi-jeon. She said her hatred for Mi-jeon was so intense she wanted to kill her. President Hu, seeing the officers enter, feigned grief and self-reproach, muttering self-accusations. The officer offered him some comfort before letting him go home. Arriving at the warehouse where Logan Lee was detained, President Hu laughed mockingly at him. He produced documents, revealing he'd extorted a large sum using evidence of Naeon's abandonment. Logan Lee struggled and shouted, "I'll kill you even if it costs me my life." In high spirits, President Hu returned home and embraced Boyoung. It turned out the final twist was all part of their plan. After sending Woo In-suk away that day, President Hu sought out Boyoung and revealed his plan to her. He intended to use Woo In-suk to retaliate against Mi-jeon. Meanwhile, Woo In-suk was on her way to turn herself in at the police station. Along the way, she discarded the small knife hidden in her bag. After she left, Secretary Chow retrieved the knife and intercepted Woo In-suk, claiming President Hu urgently needed to see her and ordering her to return to the penthouse immediately. President Hu had the butler call Mi-jeon, warning that the children were in danger to lure her over. The twin siblings were left behind to practice. When Mi-jeon rushed to the scene, President Hu stabbed her multiple times before smashing a vase to draw Woo In-suk into the study. Seeing Mi-jeon collapsed in the study, Woo In-suk pulled the knife from Mi-jeon's body and wept uncontrollably while holding her. Butler Yang returned, witnessed the scene, and screamed as he ran out to call the police. Later, Boyoung arrived at Woo In-suk's home with others. They placed a family portrait of President Hu and hung Mi-jeon's clothes, staging the scene to make it appear as if Woo In-suk had attempted to harm President Hu. It must be said that President Hu's two birds with one stone strategy was truly ingenious. That evening, Youngsun returned home after recovering. She mentioned her grandfather to her mother. That night, she happened to pass by and witnessed her mother and grandfather arguing. She hurriedly pulled out her phone and recorded the entire incident. It turned out Youngsun was the mysterious person who sent the video to Boyoung. The day of the court hearing arrived quickly. A reporter tracked down Woo In-suk and handed her the petition Mi-jeon had given him. He revealed that Mi-jeon had long since forgiven her. Facing the petition and recalling Mi-jeon's past kindness, Woo In-suk broke down in tears. In court, the judge declared that Woo In-suk had resorted to any means to win President Hu's favor. Driven by jealousy, she brutally murdered Mi-jeon and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Woo In-suk suddenly lost control, screaming she didn't kill Mi-jeon and begging the judge to reopen the case. On the way back to custody, Logan Lee hijacked a police car and rescued Woo In-suk. Furious, he grabbed Woo In-suk and demanded why she killed his sister and Mi-jeon. Woo In-suk countered that she hadn't killed Mi-jeon, though she admitted responsibility for Mi-jeon's death. She told Logan Lee she would personally deal with President Hu and Boyoung. After completing everything, she would die willingly. Woo In-suk gradually collapsed to the ground while the real culprit remained at large. But the story doesn't truly end here.